This program is brought to you by Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers.
Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Welcome to Eagle News International. Now to the news. First, China announced the suspension of Hong Kong's extradition treaties with Canada, Australia, and Britain, a tit-for-tat move following similar decisions by those countries over a controversial new security law. Let's listen in.
Recently, Canada, Australia, and the UK, citing the national security law for Hong Kong as an excuse, unilaterally suspended their agreements on surrender of fugitive offenders with the Hong Kong SAR. Such actions constitute gross interference in China's internal affairs and severe violation of international law and basic norms of international relations. China firmly opposes that. With the central government's assistance and mandate, and in accordance with the basic law, under the framework of these agreements, the Hong Kong SAR has offered its positive assistance to Canadian, Australian, and UK sides. Judicial cooperation has been politically manipulated by Canada, Australia, and the UK. A wrong move that damages such cooperation's foundation and deviates from its purpose of upholding justice and rule of law. Therefore, China has decided that the Hong Kong SAR will suspend its agreements on surrendering fugitive offenders and on mutual assistance in criminal matters with Canada, Australia, and the UK.
Now, China also warned that it reserves the right to respond after New Zealand suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. Western nations have angered Beijing over their responses to the law imposed on Hong Kong, which they see as an erosion of the civil liberties and human rights the city has enjoyed since its handover from Britain in 1997. The United States has decided to rescind Hong Kong's special trading privileges, while Washington's Five Eyes intelligence partners have suspended their extradition treaties with the city, with New Zealand on Tuesday joining Canada, Britain, and Australia. The United States has signaled it was preparing to do the same, and China has accused the countries of interfering in its internal affairs and defended the security law as crucial to restore order in Hong Kong following a wave of pro-democracy protests marred by violence. The European Union will restrict exports to Hong Kong of equipment that could be used for surveillance and repression after Beijing imposed a controversial new security law, according to diplomatic sources on Tuesday. The EU has struggled to agree a united response to China, with member states deeply divided over whether to stand up to Beijing, a hugely important trading partner, or to try to cooperate with it. France and Germany proposed the restriction on the so-called dual-use technology at a meeting of foreign ministers earlier this month, and it'll be formally signed off Tuesday, today. Along with the export restriction, the EU will also bring in measures to support the population of the former British colony by making it easier for them to travel to Europe through the granting of visas, scholarships, and academic exchanges, according to diplomats. After presenting the plan, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said that with a new security law in place, it makes sense to treat Hong Kong no differently from mainland China when it comes to the export of equipment that can be used for repression. Hong Kong's former colonial ruler Britain suspended its extradition treaty last week, saying the security law had significantly changed key assumptions, including a provision to try certain cases in mainland China. Another headline for today, former Malaysian leader Najib Razak was sentenced to 12 years in jail on corruption charges linked to the multi-billion-dollar 1MDB scandal that led to the downfall of his government 2 years ago. The ex-prime minister was also fined almost $50 million after being convicted on all 7 charges in the first of several trials related to the looting of the One Malaysia Development Berhad Sovereign Wealth Fund, or 1MDB. 1MDB was a state investment fund which Najib launched in 2009, shortly after becoming prime minister. Its portfolio included power plants and other energy assets in Malaysia and the Middle East, as well as real estate in Kuala Lumpur. Now, the fund was closely overseen by Najib. Whistleblowers say Lau Taik Jo, a jet-setting Malaysian financier close to Najib, but with no official position, helped set up 1MDB and then made key financial decisions. Najib's lawyer said he was tricked by Lau into believing the money was a donation from Saudi royalty. But the judge dismissed the notion as far-fetched. Kuala Lumpur's High Court found Najib guilty on 7 charges regarding the transfer of 42 million ringgit, or $9.9 million US, from a former 1MDB unit to his bank accounts. Now, his lawyers insisted he had no knowledge of the transfers and claimed that Lau was the true mastermind behind the scam. After finding him guilty on a range of charges, including abuse of power, criminal breach of trust, and money laundering, the judge sentenced Najib to between 10 and 12 years on each. The sentences will run concurrently, however, meaning he will remain behind bars for 12 years. Najib's lawyers are pushing for him to remain on bail while he appeals the verdict. Malaysia had also charged Goldman Sachs, claiming large amounts were stolen when the bank arranged bond issues for 1MDB. But the two sides agreed to a $3.9 billion settlement last week. Officials around the world reintroduced a raft of restrictions, from beach closures to quarantine measures, to try to tamp down the coronavirus hotspots as the official global death toll passed 650,000. Since emerging in China late last year, the virus has killed a total of 650,011 people. But more than 100,000 deaths have been recorded since July 9, and the global toll has doubled in just over 2 months. The United States has the most deaths with 146,968, followed by Brazil with 87,004, Britain with 45,752, Mexico 43,680, and Italy with 35,112. The number of coronavirus infections has hit 16.3 million worldwide. Keeping borders closed to halt the spread of COVID-19 is unsustainable, the World Health Organization said, urging countries to adopt comprehensive strategies based on local knowledge of where the virus is spreading. Border closures and travel restrictions remain an important part of many countries' strategy to combat COVID-19. Let's listen in.
Of opening borders and increasing mobility. And how do you manage that risk? And again, it comes back to this idea that it is going to be almost impossible for individual countries to keep their borders shut for the foreseeable future. Economies have to open up, people have to work, trade has to resume. So how do we reopen and how do we re-engage in global commerce and the movement of people and goods and services, but do it in a way in which we minimize the risks associated with that of moving the disease with those people, goods and services. And I think that's what governments are grappling with now. And we do believe that it is possible to identify and to minimize the risks associated with international travel. And that begins, obviously that's between governments in terms of what the policies are for the movement of people between one country and another. And then it is about how do you de-risk, or how do you take the risk out of that process by ensuring that sick people don't travel, by having the proper health checks along the way, that when people arrive in a second country that they're monitoring their symptoms or whatever they're implementing, whatever the rules of that country are. It is difficult to have a one-size-fits-all. If I'm a small island nation with absolutely no COVID, then I'm going to, one case, could represent a disaster for my country. Whereas if I'm a country with a very large incidence of disease with open borders, then shutting my borders may or may not make any difference to the overall movement or the overall incidence of disease in my country. So the consequence and the risk and the threat, in a sense, that a disease represents is not just the risk of the disease moving, it's the impact that that disease. It is tough on people right now because as countries like everybody else in the world move through this period of continued uncertainty, it is difficult to get those travel measures absolutely right. You can open up and then have to shut down, and then open up and have to shut down. And some people say, well, better to stay shut because that's more consistent, but it's also not making any progress. So how do you make progress with opening up national and international economies? How you do that in a way that's least risky, but how do you do that in a way that you can pull back if you need to, slow down or reverse? And that's the conundrum we're facing, both in terms of national travel and international travel at the moment. But continuing to keep international borders sealed is not necessarily a sustainable strategy for the world's economy, for the world's poor, or for anybody else. So we really do have to make progress on beginning to do that, but do it in a way that is least risky. And we're working very closely with member states on that. We're working with the travel industry and others. But it is very difficult to have a global one-size-fits-all policy because the nature of risk and the nature of the impact is so determined by the local context and by the national or subnational situation.
At the same time, rising cases in a range of countries in Europe and elsewhere that had loosened measures after appearing to get their outbreaks under control have spurred discussions of possible fresh border closures. But the UN health body warned that such measures cannot be kept up indefinitely and are also only useful when combined with a wide range of other measures to detect and break chains of transmission. Now, WHO's emergencies chief, Dr. Michael Ryan, also said that countries should be prepared to tighten or loosen measures accordingly, warning against releasing pressure on COVID-19, which has already killed some 650,000 people and infected 16.3 million worldwide. Let's listen in again.
This is, as I said, the first time we've dealt with this new and novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. So the assumptions that the disease would naturally be come in waves is an assumption that's based on previous pandemics with other respiratory viruses like influenza. I think what is clear is that countries that have implemented control measures have suppressed the virus. And when those measures to suppress the virus are lifted, the virus returns. And I think what is clear that pressure on the virus successfully pushes the numbers down, release pressure on the virus, and the numbers can creep back up. So whether we're dealing with second peaks within the first wave or second waves, in some senses is not the right question to ask. The question to ask is, how much pressure do you have on the virus? Do you understand where the virus is in your country? Do you understand the populations that are being affected? Have you got in place the necessary control measures to keep pressure on the virus? Because every single country where pressure has been lifted on the virus, where virus is still at community level, there's been a jump back in cases. And the question is, how effective are our authorities at reacting to those increased numbers? And to what extent are communities empowered, supported, and involved in that process and playing their part in suppressing the virus transmission? Because we could turn this into an academic argument over second peak, second wave. I think that's not the right discussion to have. We need to keep pressure on the virus. Those countries that are pressuring the virus are succeeding. Other countries are struggling, and we need to be able to change the game.
All right. Meanwhile, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez called on the UK government's decision to impose a 14-day quarantine on everyone arriving from the European country was unjust. In an interview with the Telecinco TV network, Prime Minister Sanchez said his government was talking with British authorities to try to get them to reconsider their decision. He said the UK had made an error by considering the infection rate for the whole country. On July 25, the UK government announced that travelers arriving from Spain must now quarantine for 14 days under new coronavirus travel rules following a spike in COVID-19 cases there. Now, according to the rules, quarantine measures apply to those returning from mainland Spain, the Canary Islands, and the Balearic Islands such as Mallorca and Ibiza. Meanwhile, the coronavirus epidemic has destroyed the jobs of over 1 million Spaniards. But with lockdowns preventing them from looking for work, they were excluded from the unemployment count, according to data. Figures published by the National Statistics Institute showed that the number of unemployed rose by only 55,000 between April and June to 3.4 million. Now, that pushed the unemployment rate to 15.3% from 14.4% in the first quarter. But those figures significantly underestimate the impact of the virus on the Spanish job market, which registered a 1.07 million drop in the number of people employed during the second quarter, according to the IME. The unemployment data is based on surveys, not claims for benefits, and the survey counts only people actively seeking a job as unemployed, as the lockdowns imposed to stop the spread of coronavirus kept people from hunting for jobs. They were not considered as unemployed by the survey. The International Monetary Fund estimates unemployment in Spain could soar to 20.8% in 2020, while the government expects a figure of 19%. Meanwhile, Germany's Disease Control Agency voiced great concern over rising virus numbers in the country as authorities issued a travel warning against parts of Spain. Take a look.
Meine Damen und Herren, die neueste Entwicklung in Deutschland, die neueste Entwicklung der Covid-19-Fallzahlen, die macht mir und die macht uns allen im Robert-Koch-Institut große Sorgen. Wir hatten es ja alle geschafft, die Fallzahlen über mehrere Wochen stabil zu halten.
Germany has fared better than many of its neighbors in suppressing the virus. But Mr. Wheeler urged citizens not to squander the progress following a spike numbers in recent weeks. Face masks should be worn not only indoors but also outdoors. If the recommended 1.5 meter distancing cannot be maintained, he said in a subtle update of the prior advice. Germany's foreign minister updated its travel advisory recommending against travel to 3 regions in northern Spain grappling with renewed outbreaks. He said non-essential tourist travel to the autonomous communities of Aragon, Catalonia, and Navarra are currently discouraged due to renewed high levels of infections and local lockdowns. The RKI chief said Germans bringing the virus back from their summer holidays was one reason for the surge in cases. But he also pointed to outbreaks happening at the workplaces and open-air parties. Germany has so far recorded a total of 206,242 coronavirus cases and 9,122 deaths. Meanwhile, the British citizens in the Spanish city of Torremolinos reacted to the British Parliament's decision to require passengers arriving from Spain to self-isolate as a protective measure against COVID-19. Let's listen in.
We live here, but we are British citizens, and it's going to make it really difficult now for the economy in the bars to be able to grow and get back to normal life when in the UK people are not going to want to come over here now because it's portraying us in a really bad light.
I stay in Ecuador Park, and then an English family turned around this morning and said, we have to go home now tomorrow morning and stay in quarantine for 2 weeks when we have to go to work. How is that fair to the British people? And how is it fair to the Spanish people who have jobs and businesses?
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned of a second wave in Europe of the coronavirus as he defended a controversial decision to quarantine all travelers arriving from Spain despite criticism from Madrid. Johnson insisted the UK had taken swift and decisive action at the weekend to impose a 14-day quarantine on everyone entering Britain from Spain, a major tourist destination for Britons. Take a look.
These are decisions for families, for individuals about where they want to go, and what we have to do is take swift and decisive action where we think that the risks are starting to bubble up again. And let's be absolutely clear about what's happening in Europe, amongst some of our European friends. I'm afraid you are starting to see in some places the signs of a second wave of the pandemic. It's vital that when people are coming back from abroad, if they're coming back from a place where I'm afraid there is another outbreak, they must go into quarantine. And that's why we've taken the action that we have, and we will continue throughout the summer to take such action where it is necessary. So I'm afraid that is the best advice I can give people, because at the moment we've got to stick with the guidance that we're giving. We've given the guidance now about Spain and about some other places around the world. I'm afraid if we do see signs of a second wave in other countries, it is really our job, our duty to act swiftly and decisively to stop reinfecting, to stop that travellers coming back from those places seeding the disease here in the UK.
The move was subsequently criticized by both the Spanish government and in the UK. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez called the decision unbalanced and insisted parts of his country were safer from the virus than areas of Britain. But Prime Minister Johnson, on a visit to the English Midlands, said it was the correct move, and Britain imposed the measure following a recent surge of cases there in Spain. Norway has imposed similar conditions, and French Prime Minister Jean Castex has strongly recommended that people avoid going to northeastern Spain, the worst hit area. And Vietnam will suspend all flights and public transport into and out of a city of 1.1 million people, where the country's first coronavirus cases in months were recently detected, according to authorities. Now, until the weekend, it appeared that the Southeast Asian country had managed to stub out the virus. And with lockdowns lifted since late April, domestic tourists had flocked back to the coastal city of Da Nang. But fresh restrictions on movement, including stopping buses and taxis within the city, were announced following the discovery of Vietnam's first locally transmitted COVID-19 infection in nearly 100 days. The Transport Ministry made the order on Monday evening, just hours before it goes into effect at midnight. After a 57-year-old retired Vietnamese man in Da Nang was confirmed to have the disease on Saturday, the first community transmission since April 16, more than a dozen new infections have been found. Da Nang is a popular tourist destination, and its beaches and restaurants have been packed with local visitors. From Monday until the end of the week, the city was scheduled to receive around 80,000 passengers on domestic flights, according to the country's Civil Aviation Authority. Now, earlier in the day, the body said some airlines would increase outbound flights to ferry fearful passengers out. But by nightfall, the Transport Ministry announced all routes in and out of the city would be suspended. Trains, boats to islands, buses, taxis, and tourist vehicles in Da Nang will also be halted for 15 days. And the Department of Health reported 1,678 new coronavirus disease cases or infections, raising the overall tally to 83,673. The DOH also said the additional cases reported were based on the total tests done by 81 out of 91 operational laboratories. Majority of the newly announced cases are from the National Capital Region with 698 cases, Laguna with 218, Cebu with 100, Cavite with 87, and Davao del Sur with 33 cases. It also reported 173 new recoveries and 4 deaths. These figures bring the total number of recoveries to 26,617 and the total number of deaths to 1,947. In a virtual COVID-19 presser, DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said the ages of the fatalities are 32, 47, 60, and 80 years old. An additional 6.7 million children under the age of 5 could suffer from wasting and therefore become dangerously undernourished in 2020 as a result of the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic, according to the UNICEF. According to an analysis published in The Lancet, 80% of these children would be from Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Over half would be from South Asia alone. Wasting is a life-threatening form of malnutrition, which makes children too thin and weak and puts them at greater risk of dying, poor growth development, and learning. According to UNICEF, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, 47 million children were already wasted in 2019. And without urgent action, the global number of children suffering from wasting could reach almost 54 million over the course of the year. This would bring global wasting to levels not seen this millennium. The Lancet analysis found that the prevalence of wasting among children under the age of 5 could increase by 14.3% in low and middle income countries this year due to the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19. Such an increase in child malnutrition would translate into over 10,000 additional child deaths per month, with over 50% of these deaths in Sub-Saharan Africa. The estimated increase in child wasting is only the tip of the iceberg. UN agencies warn COVID-19 will also increase other forms of malnutrition in children and women, including stunting, micronutrient deficiencies, and overweight and obesity as a result of poorer diets and the disruption of nutrition services. UNICEF reports from the early months of the pandemic suggest a 30% overall reduction in the coverage of essential and often life-saving nutrition services. And in some countries, these disruptions have reached 75% to 100% under lockdown measures. Eagle News will be right back.
Bank of Commerce. What we are is personal banking, where we understand that every deposit is your hard-earned money. Every loan is for good reason. Every service aids in your convenience. Every business of ours is meant to grow yours. We hear you, feel you, and we act on your every banking need. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation.
With great joy, I joined the Brethren of Goodwill in congratulating the leaders and members of Iglesia ni Cristo, led by Executive Minister Ca Eduardo V. Manalo, as they celebrate 106 years in exemplary service to the worthy cause of the Lord. For more than a century, the Iglesia ni Cristo has proven itself to be a caring shepherd, not only in service of God, but also in promoting the welfare of believers in all parts of the world. For sowing the seeds of this Christian faith and brotherhood, we are eternally grateful to its founder, Ca Felix V. Manalo. Now under the able leadership of Ca Eduardo Manalo, the Iglesia ni Cristo has been relentless in continuing its mission of spreading the gospel, regardless of race, and of bringing back compassion into our lives. As you mark another milestone in Christian servitude, I take this opportunity to pray for wisdom and knowledge to be bestowed to each and every member of Iglesia ni Cristo in the years to come. May our good Lord lead you in the next phase of service as you touch the lives near and far away where the Lord has purposed you to reach. I also pray that our good Lord be with you and bless you abundantly as a church. Stay blessed always.
Crisis hit Japanese automaker Nissan warned of a massive $6.4 billion net loss for the current fiscal year as it reels from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Nissan, which had delayed an annual forecast because of ongoing uncertainty, issued the warning as it reported a first quarter net loss of 285.6 billion yen on plunging sales. Now, these results reflect a full quarter of COVID-19 disruption that we knew would undermine our performance in key markets, according to Chief Operating Officer Ashwani Gupta upon announcing the results. Nissan also said the value of global sales plunged 50.5%, with falls across markets including Japan, China, and the U.S. And it warned the woes would continue, forecasting annual sales will plunge 21% to 7.8 trillion yen, following a 15% drop the previous year. Nissan was already battling weak demand as well as the fallout from the arrest of former boss Carlos Ghosn, currently an international fugitive after jumping bail and fleeing Japan before the coronavirus pandemic hit. Gold chalked up another record peak before pulling lower as the dollar clawed back earlier losses, while equity markets struggled with mounting coronavirus fears, according to dealers. Now, with worrying new spikes in infections in Asia and Europe, on top of the already high new U.S. cases, forcing governments to impose strict COVID-19 containment measures, the global economic outlook remains clouded, putting the brakes on a months-long stocks rally. The virus uncertainty, combined with China-U.S. tensions, has sent gold soaring nearly 30% this year. And on Tuesday, it struck another record pinnacle at 1,981.27 per ounce in Asian trade. Now, that smashed the previous day's peak, but it later pared the advance to sit the lower for the day. Now, but observers say $2,000 could be broken as early as this week, with focus on the Federal Reserve's next policy meeting, which is tipped to see it unveil more easing measures to support the world's top economy. U.S. second quarter economic growth data is also due this week, and a disappointing reading on what is expected to be a historic contraction could fuel further dollar weakness. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to defeat the coronavirus by unleashing American scientific genius as he toured a COVID-19 vaccine facility in the swing state of North Carolina. Now, President Trump appears to have pinned his hopes on the swift emergence of a successful vaccine to both contain the country's still raging epidemic and revive his faltering re-election hopes. Let's listen in.
Morning. The Moderna vaccine has officially entered phase 3 already, and that's phase 3 clinical trials, the final stage before approval. I heard very positive things, but by the end of the year, we think we're in very good shape to be doing that. By the end of this year, we're going to be, in terms of the vaccine, I think.
He was visiting Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies in Morrisville. Now, the facility has been awarded a contract to mass-produce an experimental vaccine developed by Novavax as part of a multi-billion-dollar government initiative dubbed Operation Warp Speed. The plan involves investing heavily in leading pharmaceuticals to aid their development and manufacturing efforts, with the goal of delivering 300 million doses of vaccine by January 2021. The U.S. is by far the worst-hit country in the world, with more than 4.2 million confirmed COVID-19 cases and nearly 150,000 deaths. Though the number of new cases has leveled off over the past few days, the U.S. has failed to push its curve down, as other nations have done through lockdowns and physical distancing. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien has tested positive for COVID-19. O'Brien, who holds a key role in the administration, has been self-isolating and working from a secure location off-site, according to the White House in a statement, adding that there's no risk of exposure to the president or the vice president. In other news, NASA on Monday gave its latest Mars rover Perseverance the all clear to launch later this week on a mission, according to scientists, to seek out signs of ancient microbial life. Let's listen in.
We are in extraordinary times right now with the coronavirus pandemic, and yet we have, in fact, persevered. And we have protected this mission because it is so important. We declared this mission to be essential. For the first time ever, we're going to fly a helicopter on another planet. We call it Ingenuity. And of course, Ingenuity is going to be a tech demonstrator for this particular mission, but in the future, it could transform how we do planetary science on these other worlds, and eventually be a scout so that we can figure out where exactly do we need to send our robots. This is the first time in history when NASA has dedicated a mission to what we call astrobiology, the search for life, either maybe now, or ancient life on another world. And of course, when we go to the Jezero crater, which is obviously a big crater on Mars, but it's also a former lake bed, and it had a river that flowed into it, and that river delta is a place where we believe there could be, not saying there is, we don't know, but there could have been at one point in time life.
That we're doing transformative science. Really, for the first time, we're looking for signs of life on another planet. And as Thomas mentioned, for the first time, we're going to collect samples. It'll be part of, we hope, the first sample return from another planet. And
I would have never thought that a launch director would be working from home. And I've done that for the last 5 months. And we used to have something called every other year here called Take Your Kids to Work. Well, guess what? Every day was Take Your Kids to Work Day.
The launch will take place at 7:50 a.m. local time on Thursday from Cape Canaveral, Florida, on board a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket. Live coverage will take place on YouTube and across social media platforms. Following a 7-month journey, Perseverance is set to land at Jezero Crater on February 18, 2021. The 6-wheeled robot, which is about the size of an SUV and weighs 2,300 pounds, is NASA's 5th Mars rover and its most advanced to date. It comes equipped with a small helicopter called Ingenuity that will attempt to fly a first on another planet, as well as a robotic arm and an array of cameras and a pair of microphones. Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
This is Gary Vasquez, a Filipino inventor, and I'm greeting the Iglesia ni Cristo on the 106th anniversary.
All right, joining us live from Portland, Oregon, am I right, is our EBC correspondent, Jess Barnuevo. Hello, Jess.
Hello, Alma.
Hi. Oh, good to see you.
Hello.
Happy to see you. Okay, so what do you have for us?
All right, so for the past 8 weeks,
yes,
demonstrators have come out to protest police brutality and systemic racism and more recently, the presence of federal officers. A group gathered at Gateway Discovery Park in northeast Portland to honor John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian. They then took to the streets for a march. Lewis was a congressman for Georgia and a civil rights icon. He died on July 17. Vivian was a minister, civil rights activist, and close advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. He also died on July 17. In downtown Portland, a group of lawyers planned to meet at 7th Street Fountain and march to the Multnomah County Justice Center to join other demonstrators. Around 7 p.m., police were called out to report of a shot fired near Southwest 4th Avenue and Southwest 7th Street, which is near close to the federal courthouse. On Saturday, protesters gathered at a few locations, including the police union building in North Portland. Others marched in Northeast Portland, and thousands gathered outside the federal courthouse and Justice Center. Around 1:20 a.m., police declared the scene downtown a riot and used munitions, including CS gas, to disperse the crowd. On Friday, the top federal prosecutor in Oregon lashed out against city and community leaders for not taking control of nightly protests in downtown Portland. In court papers, federal prosecutors have suggested the Marco Hatfield Federal Courthouse has sustained more than $50,000 in damage from graffiti, fires, and vandalism. The Oregon Health Authority, or OHA, announced 277 new coronavirus patients on Sunday, with 16,758 confirmed or presumptive cases statewide since the pandemic began. 3 more people have died of coronavirus in Oregon, health officials said, bringing the state's death toll to 289. The 3 most recent identified coronavirus deaths involved people with underlying health conditions. According to the latest data on the OHA website from Friday, only 9% of all COVID-19 cases have led to hospitalization in Oregon. More than 1,200 patients have been released from hospitals. However, there are still currently 233 patients hospitalized with confirmed or suspected COVID-19. Of those patients, 58 beds and 30 are on ventilators. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Okay, Jess, so the protests, the issue is still with is about the killing of George Floyd, isn't it?
I believe, yes, it influenced and sparked all this movement.
So there's a risk of exacerbating or increasing or might be a spike of coronavirus cases because of these protests, right?
Yes.
It does. Have you seen any of the protests outside? Have you been there?
I haven't witnessed them as they are downtown, but I do remember a specific day I could look out my window and see a stream of people walking, in a crowd, like, peacefully protesting. They were all walking in a stream. Yeah.
So how has it been? Has it been mostly peaceful, or were there riots?
In this area I'm in, it's not as much of a concern, but the riots are making huge waves in the media, from what I hear.
All right. Thank you very much, Jess. You take care. And
Thank you, Alma.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Alma. Likewise, reporting from Portland, Oregon, this is Jessica Barnuevo, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Jess. An outbreak of COVID-19 rocked Major League Baseball, forcing the postponement of multiple games less than a week after the sport launched its season following a 4-month coronavirus delay. Major League Baseball confirmed in a statement that games between the Miami Marlins and Baltimore Orioles in Florida and the Philadelphia Phillies and New York Yankees in Pennsylvania had been scrapped. The decision followed reports that 10 more members of the Marlins' 8 players and 2 coaches had tested positive for the coronavirus following Sunday's game against the Phillies in Philadelphia. 4 Marlins players, pitcher Jose Jurena, first baseman Garrett Cooper, outfielder Harold Ramirez, and catcher Jorge Alfaro had already tested positive for COVID-19. Now, MLB, or Major League Baseball, said in a statement that the games had been postponed in order to allow for additional testing. The Iglesia Ni Cristo in the United Kingdom donated thousands of face masks. Here's Laban Season for the details.
As part of EBC's special anniversary broadcast, Iglesia Ni Cristo here in the United Kingdom has been actively involving themselves in the community, making a positive impact. Recently, through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, INC members donated thousands of PPEs such as face masks, even Goodwill bags and hampers to many healthcare institutions and care homes throughout the country, and even to the vulnerable people in the communities. Let's watch this special report by correspondent Grace Rivera.
As society adjusts to the new normal following the worldwide outbreak of coronavirus, communities are now slowly easing back to their daily routine. The aftermath of COVID has left the world dealing with public health challenges.
Coming to work during this pandemic, it's worth risking our lives for it.
It has been a struggle because the centre is shut, but we are still running the food bank. And I'm running the food bank on a smaller group of volunteers. But there's an increase in the number of people that are accessing our food bank. So normally we would feed 50, 60 people. At the moment we're like 95, 100 people are coming to the centre requiring help from us. And that's what we're struggling with at the moment.
Obviously there was a short supply of PPE for the NHS and for care homes at the start. Like yourselves have come today to donate some face masks. That's always a big help.
The Iglesia Ni Cristo continues to extend their charity work through projects launched by the Church's Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, through projects such as Aid to Humanity.
It has such a big impact because there's certain food items that we're short of, and your donation is a fantastic help. So we don't get a lot of non-perishable food, the tins, the packets, and that's what we need a lot of, and that's what the Church of Christ is really great at doing, is providing that kind of food for us.
For me, it makes me happy because I know that there's other people out there considering, the vulnerable people and are willing to put forward and help them out.
In terms of donations of PPE, I'm not too sure we've had many of that. I think you may be one of the first. I think it's just, it keeps you wanting to come into work, wanting to come in and do your job and look after the residents, and knowing that you could potentially contract the virus yourself, but you're still coming in, putting yourself at risk.
Because this is really going to be a very big help to us here and take a lot of stress off what we do. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you to the Church of Christ for our lovely donations.
I would like to thank the Church of Christ in England for the donation you've done for our lovely staff and residents.
This is a big thank you from Ashgate House to the Church of Christ. Thank you very, very much.
Hello, this is a message for Eduardo with our grateful thanks from Princess Court staff and residents for your very, very kind, very welcome donation.
We'd really like to thank the administration of the Church of Christ for the donation of these really useful face masks.
I want to thank the Church of Christ and Brother Eduardo Manalo for the face mask donation.
I would like just to thank Brother Eduardo from the Church of Christ in Belfast for these lovely donations of face masks and stuff for the staff.
Thank you, Church of Christ, for all your donations.
I would like to say a big thanks to Eduardo Manalo and the whole congregation.
Just want to say thank you very much for your donations and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Come back anytime.
Thank you so much for coming today. The extra PPE is greatly appreciated.
When Josie got in touch with me, I was so pleased from the bottom of my heart, because I know that you guys always support us in a great way, and the food that you donate, it's going to help so many people, have such a big impact on people.
Reporting for EBC United Kingdom, I am Grace Rivera, and I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
The response from the healthcare community have been really positive, and going by the video played earlier on, you can tell how much they appreciated the efforts of the Iglesia Ni Cristo and the church administration for remembering them during the pandemic. Usually, churches here in England are the ones needing donations and support, but the Iglesia Ni Cristo, to be the one going out there giving donations to the communities, hospitals and care homes, it's a nice change, and it did come to them as a pleasant surprise. The face masks are reusable and of good quality, so healthcare staff said they are useful, especially when traveling for work. Many INC congregations also added a personal touch by giving away goodwill bags containing sanitizers, wipes, hand washes, and many packages given contain snacks to bring cheer and some hampers to lift up the spirits of the frontline workers during this difficult time. Iglesia Ni Cristo recognizes how important it is for their members to be actively involved in helping the local communities. Oftentimes, the support that the people receive here from the UK government and other non-profit organizations are not enough. The INC members, through the leadership of their Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, has been conducting a lot of charitable activities under the INC Giving and Aid to Humanity projects. So they are not new to this kind of initiative. Here in the UK alone, aside from the face mask donations, INC have been regularly conducting INC giving events like appreciation days for frontliners, teachers and policemen, cleanup drives and tree planting. They spend time with care home residents to hold Singing for a Cause events. They also conduct food and clothes donation drives and blood donation. So the list goes on. In short, the INC members here are really embracing the spirit of love for their fellow men, but not just by holding charitable events, but they are also actively sharing their faith, especially in these worrying times. Lastly, congratulations to the Iglesia Ni Cristo members and to the Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, on the 106th anniversary. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Love Ann Season, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Love Ann. Before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We thank customers.